Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trilokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Tvameva Bandhuscha Sakha Tvameva Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Om Sahana Bhavatu, Sahana Bhunatu, Saviryam Karavavahai, Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So if I remember what Mark had said, we're in chapter 11, verse 11 this evening.
That's what I think.
Pardon me?
That's where I think we are.
Puneet, will you help us out, please?
Yeah. Ananda stri vidho brahma Anando vidya sukham tatha Vishayananda ityadau Brahmanando vivichyate. Bliss is of three kinds: the bliss of Brahman, the bliss which is born of knowledge, and the bliss which is produced by contact with outer objects. First, the bliss of Brahman is being described.
This is going to be an interesting section. So he's enumerated first the bliss of Brahman, the bliss of knowledge, and the bliss of contact with the senses. Okay, next verse.
Brigu putra pitu shrutva varuna hrihya lakshanam anna prana mano buddhi satyaktvananda vijignavan. Brigu learned the definition of Brahman from his father Varuna, and negating the food sheath, the vital sheath, the mind sheath, and the intellect sheath as not being Brahman, he realized Brahman reflected in the bliss sheath.
So here, reflected in the bliss sheath, the Anandamaya Kosha, I think this is from Taittiriya Upanishad. Is there a footnote?
Yeah, Taittiriya Upanishad.
Yes, okay. So again, what is the bliss sheath? The bliss sheath is the mind in its unmanifest state, also called vyaktaha. We experience the Anandamaya Kosha in two ways. First, when we satisfy a desire, and most completely in deep sleep. Why? Because the projecting power of the mind is gone. All that's left is just the Avarana Shakti. So we're not conscious, but there's no agitation. There's no longing, no desire, no aversion. We only know of this through memory. I wake up in the morning and my experience is, oh, I must have slept so soundly I don't remember a thing. And then there's that bliss in the morning. The technical term is vasanananda, when you have just a little bit of mind, enough to punch the pillow and go, oh, I don't want to get up. This feels so good. You're just on the edge of sleep. So there's just enough mind there to consciously enjoy it. And then if you're like most of us, you go, oh, I've got an appointment that I've got to get ready for. And oh, I've got to do laundry today. And oh, I shouldn't have said what I did to so and so. I've got to clean that up. And, oh, my back hurts. Mind starts to return. And then the bliss of deep sleep starts to fade, like the morning mist in the sun. Next verse.
Anandadev bhutani jayante tena jivanam tesham layascha tatrato brahmanando na sanshayah. All beings are born of bliss and live by it, pass on to it, and finally reabsorbed in it. There is therefore no doubt that Brahman is bliss.
Yes. And not only are all beings coming from it, but it is the chief motivator. So Vedanta says from the moment you get up in the morning to the moment your head hits the pillow at night, we are only engaged in one activity, the seeking of the good and the avoidance of misery. Good here, just another name for happiness, just another name for sukham, just another name for ananda. Even when I do selfless actions, in the end is for the sake of the self. Whatever I do. The only real doubt I ever have is where the F is the good. And my misunderstanding of that can lead me into a lot of trouble. In Gita, Krishna says, all men seek me only in all ways, just by the wrong means. So the drug addict, the person craving money, the politician wanting power, the sex-crazed person, and the religious ritualist, all of them are seeking happiness. Just by whatever means the mind has presented to. And in fact, in that way, we're no different than the dogs and the frogs. All beings are doing that alone. And then he says, we come from bliss and return to it. This is this marvelous idea in the Vedanta. I like to say Vedanta is the most compassionate of all religions. Everybody is saved. Nobody's left behind. Everybody comes home to God without exception. It's not like a river that ends up in the Dead Sea and just evaporates. No, they all go to the ocean. They all come home to Brahman. Just at different times. Just at different times. We're at different stages in our evolution, our unfolding. Next verse.
Bhutotpatte pura bhuma Triputi dvaita vaj janat Jnatri jnane Jnatri jnana jnaya rupa Triputi pralaye hino. Before the creation of beings, there was only the infinite and no triad of knower, known, and knowing. Therefore, in dissolution, the triad again ceases to exist.
So we have this technical term, triputi. Knower, knowing, and known, which is in fact nothing but the refraction of consciousness when it strikes the subtle intellect. Just like when sunlight strikes a prism, you get the rainbow. When consciousness strikes the subtle intellect, it splinters, it shatters into the triple factor: knower, knowing, and known. That's gone in deep sleep. It's gone in samadhi. Next verse.
Vijnanamaya utpanno jnata jnanam manomayah Gyeya shabdadayo naitat trayam mutpattita pura. When created, the intellectual sheath is the knower, the mind sheath is the field of knowledge, sound, etc., are the objects known. Before creation, they did not exist.
So what he's saying here is before the Big Bang of consciousness, before Ishvara created all this, there was no triple factor. Consciousness alone was. I always find it so fascinating. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, everything was void, and darkness was on the face of the deep or the waters. And God said, let there be light. So in mystic literature, frequently, the deep, the waters, is a metaphor for consciousness. That's right there in Genesis. Something was there before creation. Consciousness. Then the whole world comes into being, which is here articulated as the triplety, the triple factor. The word, being, known. Next verse.
Traya bhave tudnidvaitam purnam evanubhuyate samadhi supti murchasu purnas sprishto puratatha. In the absence of this triad, the secondless, indivisible self alone exists. The self alone existed before the projection of the world. Similarly, it exists in the states of samadhi, deep sleep, and swoon.
Yes. So in the waking state and the dream state, I have the triple factor: knower, knowing, and known. In deep sleep, no triple factor. If I faint, or we can say in modern times, if I'm under anesthetic, no triple factor. And in samadhi, no triple factor. Now listen carefully. What's the difference between deep sleep and samadhi? In deep sleep, there's still one vritti left, the avarana shakti, avidya. samadhi, that's gone. But what Vidyaranya is driving at is this experience of knower, knowing, and known is a mental creation. It's not independently and substantively.
So it is fair to say that Sahaja Samadhi is also included in the Samadhi state.
Say again, I missed what you said.
The Samadhi state listed here would also include the natural and continuous state of Sahaja Samadhi.
Yes, okay. So in Sahaja Samadhi, the triple factor is and is not. Again, we have these two great metaphors for delusion. Snake in the rope, mirage waters in the desert. Snake in the rope is like Nirvikalpa Samadhi. When you finally apprehend the rope, the snake is not available for perception. When you're in Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the world is not available for perception. In Sahaja Samadhi, the names and forms appear, but there's no longer any individual knower per se. And the names and forms, like the mirage waters in the desert, are seen to be unreal. It does not mean in Sahaja Samadhi that you're in some state of insensibility. Does that make it clearer?
Yeah, it does.
All right. Next verse.
Yo bhuma sa sukham nalpe sukham tredha vibhedini sanat kumar praha prahivam naradayati shokine. The infinite self alone is bliss. There is no bliss in the finite realm of the triad. This Sanat Kumara told the grieving Narada.
So this again is a reference to the story of Narada, who was grieving. So the whole point here, the phenomenal world has no inherent pleasure in it. Listen carefully. The phenomenal world isn't bad. Now, when we read Shankara, like in Viveka Chudamani, and he talks about developing disgust for the physical body, skin, bones, flesh, blood, filled with urine and feces, disgusting, develop disgust. My personal opinion is you got to be very careful that you don't slip into flesh hating. That is not our point. I think Shankara bangs on that because his target audience is probably young men, adolescents, probably most of them, maybe early 20s, who are horn dogs. And the thing they're thinking about the most is sex. What is the world? The world is neutral. The world is shunyata. The world is void. It has no inherent joy-giving or misery-producing qualities. The way I like to point this out is the speed of light good or bad? Is it just or unjust? Is a black hole politically correct or politically incorrect? Is a supernova virtuous or vicious? No, they just are. Truth, the whole world just is. You and I, as soon as the triple factor comes into being, there's the knower and the subtle intellect. In the mind and the knowing is all the judgment, good and bad, right and wrong, just and unjust. And we superimpose all that evaluation onto a world of name and form. It's neutral. Well, my experience is I get happiness through the world. I made a coleslaw salad for lunch today, and it was really tasty. I liked it. It was pleasurable. When desire and object of desire become one for a moment, I get a little taste of the bliss of myself. All it is. All. Yourself, your swarup is on. I just use the word to taste. Own your ananda. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Sapuranan Panchavedat Shastrani Vividhani Cha Nyatva Pyanatma Vichena Narado Shushochahi. Even though Narada was versed in the Vedas, the Puranas, and the various studies, he was full of grief because of not knowing the self.
Yeah, so here he's kind of reviewing what Narada's state was. So intellectual knowledge did not bring him peace because he did not have aparoksha jnana, direct experience of his own self-nature. Next verse.
Vedabhyasat pura tapat trayamatrena shokita panchatvabhyasya savismar bhangav varyascha shokita. Before he began the study of the Vedas, he was subject to the three usual kinds of misery. But afterwards, he was more grieved because of the added afflictions of the practices of the study, the fear of forgetting, and slips or defeat and conceit.
So this is an interesting state that many of us go through. When we're ignorant of the truth, we're unhappy because we're not getting what we want. My job isn't fulfilling. My relationship didn't turn out to be the fairy tale romance of the movies. People have died. That may drive us into the spiritual path. And then we have particular practices. If you start with ritual, you're supposed to do particular puja, do some mantra, maybe some meditation, study some scripture. Then on top of all your worldly sorrows. Oh, I keep forgetting that shloka. Oh, I can't meditate. It's so hard. I'm trying to give up my attachments, but I'm not able to do it. We see our shortcomings on the path, which are an additional sorrow. Let's see what he has to say about it.
Soham vidvan prashochami shokaparam na yatramam ityukta sukhamevasya paramitya bhyaghadrishihi. O sage, said Narada to Sanat Kumara, learned as I am in the studies, I am subject to grief. Please take me beyond this ocean of misery.
All right.
The Rishi told Narada in reply that the farther shore of the ocean of misery is the bliss of Brahman.
Yes. So what Sanakumara says to Narada is, what you're seeking is not successful ritual. It's not the capacity to memorize the mantra. The farthest shore, the goal is Brahma Vidya, knowledge of Brahman. Not indirect knowledge. Indirect knowledge is I know Brahman. Direct knowledge is I am Brahman. Next verse.
Sukham Vaishayikam Shoka Sahasrena Vritatvatah Dukkhameveti Matvaha Nalpesthi Sukhamityasau. Excuse me. As the happiness derived from sense objects is covered by thousands of afflictions, it is misery only. There is therefore no happiness in the limited.
Yes. So here, Sanakumara says to Narada, indicates the truth of this world. First thing we meditate upon when it comes to the people, places, things, and conditions of this world is impermanence, anitya, non-eternal. Then we begin to see the relationship between my desiring and my suffering. Satisfying a desire is like pouring ghee onto the sacrificial fire. What happens? It burns even higher. The more you get, the more you want. And then we have the phenomenon of the law of diminishing return. First time I satisfied this particular desire, oh, it was wonderful. But as long as I keep at it and keep repeating it, satisfaction starts to decrease until I do it more and more and more. I like to use a box of See's candies as a great example. The first See's candy is marvelous. But if you eat the whole box, I can't stop. I can't stop. That's the world. Then we see that the mind changes. What made me happy yesterday isn't making me happy today. The world changes, my mind changes. And if I stay in the mind state, that happiness is getting what I want in the way I want it. I am driven further and further into the tyranny of craving until I see that it's the craving itself that is the suffering, not the lack of the objects. I prove it every night in deep sleep. Once I can begin to see that, then I have a hope of gaining some freedom. We have to see through deep penetrating insight the relationship between kama and dukkha. They are the same thing. Such is the power of Maya. It can take us years and years and years to learn. Next verse.
Nano dvaite sukham madhut dvaitepyasti no sukham asti chedupalabhyeta tatha cha triputi bhavet. Objection. Granting there is no happiness in duality, there is no happiness in non-duality either. If you maintain that there is, then it must be experienced, and there will be the triad.
So, very clever doubt. Okay, there's no sukham, happiness in the world, getting the objects of desire. But we can't say there's happiness in non-duality, but because it implies there's someone there to experience it. I am experiencing bliss. This is a subtle thing. The scriptures will eventually say to the advanced student, now you must renounce the bliss of samadhi. Let it go. It's a mind state. I am of the mind. You cannot renounce something you don't have. Get established in samadhi. Get established in the place where your mind easily revels in the self. But understand, that's a mind state. It varies in intensity, in fact, it's endless in its depth. But here the objector is, wait a minute, that can't be perfection, because there's somebody there blissing out. Next verse, let's see how he deals with that.
Mastvat dvaitam sukham kintu sukham dvaitam evahi kimmana miti chenasti mana kanksha swayam prabhe. Reply. Let there be no experience of happiness in the state of non-duality, but non-duality itself is bliss. What is the proof? The self-revealing requires no other proof.
Yes. So, in the end, go there. if we have the great punya, the great merit, to be able to be with a man or woman of knowledge, and we have the capacity to tune their mind, when the mind ceases to be a mind, we can't really say there's someone there blissing out. It's indescribable. So here Vidyaranya is basically saying, why don't you quit thinking about it? Go where I go. Swamiji used to say, meet me there. Then all the doubts that fall away. Next verse.
Swaprabhatve bhavat vakyam manam yasmad bhavanidam advaitam bhyupet yasmin sukham nasti ti bhashate. Your objection itself is evidence of the self-revealing nature of the existence of self-conscious non-duality. For you admit the existence of the second bliss and merely contend that it is not bliss.
So what he's basically saying is, what the doubter does not really doubt is Sat and Chit. I am, I know. The doubt comes is the self bliss? Now, many of you have heard me wrestle with this with people. In the beginning, I translate Ananda as no sorrow reaches there. I think it avoids this doubt. When we translate Ananda as bliss, people start to superimpose some emotional state. So start with defining Ananda as no sorrow reaches there. Physical pain gets to my body, emotional pains get to my mind, doubt and confusion get to my intellect, but I am a still point. Then why do we call it bliss absolute? Because when the mind ceases to be a mind, meaning in its extroverted state, and it subsides into the self, like the waves subsiding into the ocean. Chidananda Rupam, my form is this consciousness. Let's see how Vidyaranya talks about it. Next verse.
Nabhyupayam yahamadvaitam tadvacho nudhya dushanam vachmiti chetada bruhi kimasi dvaitatah pura. Objection. I do not admit non-duality, but only accept it as a hypothesis to be refuted. Reply.
Go on.
Then tell us what existed before duality emerged.
Is that his reply?
That was his reply. Yes.
Yes. So again, he's probably arguing against Shunyavadins. The Shunyavadins are those people who deny the non-dual reality, who say, every teaching is just a viewpoint There's no real substance to anything. Let's see what Vidyaranya says now. Going on.
Kimadvaitamudatvaitam anyo va kotirantiramah aprasiddho nadvitiyo nutpatte shishyate grimaha. Was it non-duality or duality or something different from both? It cannot have been the last because it is impossible to conceive so. It cannot have been duality because it had not yet emerged. Hence, non-duality alone remains.
So he's speaking about how logically non-duality, Brahman alone, has to be there prior to the emergence of duality. I will be very honest with you. It's way above my pay grade. If, on the other hand, we take these particular verses as being about meditation, he's dealing with the experience that one has when the personal sense of self evaporates. It's gone. The Buddhists frame it in the language, there's no self. It's a real experience. Yet something there is that knows there was a presence of a personal sense of self, but now it's gone. So the problem is really only a matter of the use of language. I'll tell you my theory. My theory, if we go back to early pre-Buddhist scriptures, there's layers and layers and layers of Hindu teaching where they've absorbed different things. And the use of the word Atman, Purusha, are imprecise. They refer to various things. The Guru interprets those from their context and out of his own direct experience. So, for example, in Gita, sometimes the word Atman means the infinite. Sometimes it means the transmigrating soul. Sometimes it actually even means the body. So we get Jivatman, Jiva Atman, the individual soul, Paramatman, the supreme soul. So one is real, the other is real. Do they join together? What happens? It's why I don't like to use that language. I don't even like to use the word jiva. Some of the scriptures will use it. I will use the language, I've shamelessly stolen it from Gaudapada, jiva bhavana, the attitude or the feeling that I'm a person. For example, is the dream body and the dream ego that apparently inhabits it, is it real? Is there a real thing called the dreamer going through these tribulations? And does he get liberated? Does the dreamer become a waker? Well, kind of yes. But what really happens is, poof, it's gone. oh, what a vivid dream. But it was just imagination, real experience. But there's no real dream body. There's no real dream ego. It's just imagination. Vedanta thunders, in this world, it's really no different. But something there is that is real. You thin the mind, introvert the attentive faculty. Go looking for this personal sense of self. Saturday morning, we started Aitareya Upanishad. I'm pretty sure it's in this Upanishad. We get the great question that Ramana Maharshi taught us as basic teaching. Koham, who am I? When the attentive faculty turns within, go look for this apparent ego self, this Jivatma. You can't find it. It falls. Something very real is there. Prajnanam Brahma. The consciousness of Brahman. All right, next verse.
Advaita siddhiyuktyaiva nanubhut yeti chedvada nirdrishtanta sadrishtanta vakotya anta matrano. Objection. The truth of non-duality is established by argument only and not by experience. It cannot be experienced. Reply. Then tell whether your argument can or cannot be supported by illustration. It must be the one or the other.
Yes. Again, so here the disputant says that, did he say it cannot be established by experience or by logic? I'm sorry, read it again in English.
The truth of non-duality is established by argument only and not by experience. It cannot be experienced.
In other words, it's very clear the kids never had samadhi, which establishes as a direct experience. So we have to go from indirect knowledge to direct knowledge. Now, just to review, we've got our 4 pramanas, our 4 authorities or means of knowledge. Shruti, the scriptures say it's true. Smriti, the recorded evidence of the great avatars and saints say it's true. Our own logical reason, that's what the disputant is talking about. But we have to then verify it in the laboratory of our own direct experience. And here Vidyaranya is basically saying, don't get caught up in logical argument. Abhyasa vairagyacha. Meditate, practice, and renounce. See what's left. Next verse.
Nanubhutir nadrishtanta iti yuktistu shobhate sadrishtanta tvapakshetu Drishtantam vadame matam. You deny the possibility of the non-dual experience. At the same time, if you say there is no illustration in support of the argument that establishes non-duality, it would be a wonderful logic. You cannot say there is no illustration in its favor, for an argument must be supported by an illustration. In case there are examples, please give us an acceptable one.
Yes. So again, he's trying to deal with logic and things like that. Let me cut to the chase. Nobody doubts their existence. Nobody doubts that they know. Nothing ever really covers that up. The bondage is only in my mind. The self is never bound. All the mind needs to do is drop its belief in these false things. And then something remains. Very simple. This is why I love the example of the life of the Buddha. He did not get caught up in tarka, in argument. Although today Buddhists love it. He sat under the tree and he just watched. Let the unconscious unload. Endeavoring to see what's soul. That's a great example of what to do for all of us. You can go on meditation retreats and do that. But in the end, why not just sit at home and do it? Just as much self at home as there is on a retreat. The retreats are good. You get support. Get a structure. But a man raises himself by himself. Next verse.
Advaita pralayo dvaita nupalambhena suptivat iti chet suptira dvaitat yatra drishtanta miraya. Objection. Here is the argument with illustration. In dissolution, there is non-duality, since duality is not experienced there as in deep sleep. Reply. Please give an illustration to support your affirmation of the absence of duality in deep sleep.
Okay, so what Vijayaranya is saying is, if duality disappears in deep sleep, what is there to know it? Let me see if I can give you an example. Any of you wake up in the morning in a different position than you went to bed? Did you know that you rolled over? So in deep sleep, you cannot know presence or absence of duality. Let's see what happens in the next verse.
Drishtanta purasaptishchet aho te kaushalam mahat yasva supti navetyasya purasuptau tu katatha. Objection. The sleeping state of some other person may be an illustration. Reply. You are indeed a clever man. You have no knowledge of your own experience in deep sleep, which you are going to prove by giving the illustration of another's deep sleep, and yet you profess to know that of another.
So I do not know what happens in my own deep sleep. What's my knowledge of deep sleep? I must have slept soundly. I knew nothing. I can't even know that I know nothing. But if I walk to another person and see them sleeping, I have no idea what they know or don't know. So Vinyaranya here is saying, you've got an incorrect illustration. Going on.
Nishcheshtatvatpara suktao yathaham iti chettada udahartu sushupteste swaprabhavtvam balad bhavet. Objection. The other person is in deep sleep since he is inactive, as in my case. Reply. Then, from the force of your illustration, you admit the self-revealing nature of the non-dual truth in your own sleep.
Yes. So the point that Vidyaranya is getting at is there has to be something there that illumines even the darkness of deep sleep. Even though the mind is folded up, there's still the one vritti of ignorance. You cannot remember something you haven't experienced. Did you sleep soundly? Yes. You sure? Yes. Did I sleep soundly? I don't know. Why not? I wasn't there. You can only remember something you've experienced. The other image I like to use, deep sleep is like closing your eyes. When you close your eyes, you're not blind. You are seeing the back of your eyelids, which occludes your vision of the entire room. But you're not blind. Open your eyes and you can still see. The point of all this is the triplicity, the triple factor is dependent on the functioning of the mind. But you are not dependent on anything. You are always there. Dream state, waking state, both are just sankalpa. They're just imagination. Next verse.
Nendriyani na drishtanta tathapya angikoshinam idameva swaprabhatvam yadbhanam sadhanair vina. How? There are no sense organs for you say you are inactive. There is no illustration, for the illustration adduced by you is inadmissible, and yet there is the non-dual which you admit. This is what is known as the self-revealing nature of the non-dual. So you are forced to admit it.
So in the end, he's trying to crush this objector. The point is, you cannot deny the self-evidence of I. Its proof is that you illumine everything. You don't have to have the thought, oh, I'm me. That's just another thought. But your direct experience is you are a beginningless, changeless, eternal factor with no qualities, no characteristics, no form, the illuminator of all phenomena when the triple factor is in place. sense. But when the triple factor disappears in sleep, swoon, and samadhi, you are still there. Going on.
Stamadvait swaprabhatvevat suptau sukham katham shrinu dukkham tada nasti tadaste shishyate sukham. Objection. Admitted that there is the non-dual in the deep sleep and that it is self-revealing, what about the bliss you spoke of? Reply. When all misery is absent, that which remains is bliss.
Yes. So the idea here is the vikshepa shakti of the mind, the projecting power of the mind as the triple factor, with always its low grade, I want this, I don't want that, we need to deal with this, I need to deal with that, and kartavya, obligatory action. There's always an element of discontent, of low grade irritation. But in deep sleep, samadhi, not there. Therefore, the mind is necessary in order to be miserable. The mind is not necessary in order to be happy. Going on.
Andha sannapyanandha syat viddhotha rogyapi arogiti shruti praha taccha sarve jana viduhu. In deep sleep, the blind are not blind, the wounded are not wounded, and the ill no longer ill. Say the scriptures. All people too know this.
Yes. So the example here is quoting scripture. But all my sorrows disappear in deep sleep. That's why people like to get loaded. Why alcohol or drugs or things like that are appealing to people, because they remove much of the extroversion, the agitating power of rajas in the mind. Brings it towards tamas, which is always impermanent. But whatever my problems are, they disappear in deep sleep. And the more problems I have, the more I crave deep sleep. Next verse.
Na dukkha bhavamatreణ sukham loshtha shiladishu dvaya bhavasya drishtatvat iti ched divasham vachah. Objection. The absence of misery does not necessarily imply bliss, since objects like stone or clay are not seen to experience either misery or happiness. Reply. This is a false analogy.
Yes, mainly because stones or clays do not have minds. Their subtle intellect is so rudimentary, there's nothing hardly there at all. Let's see what Vidyaranya says about it.
Mukhadenya vikasabhyam pura dukkha sukhohavnam denyadhya bhavato loshte dukkhadhyaho na sambhavet. One infers another's grief or joy from his face, melancholy or smiling, but in clay this inference of grief, etc., from such indications is impossible.
So the idea here is I have no idea what the experiences of clay or a pot is. We can surmise, but we can't know. Going on.
स्वकीये सुखदुःखे तु मोहनीये ततस्तयोः भावो वेद्योऽनुभूत्येव तद्भावोऽपि नान्यतः. Our happiness and misery, however, are not to be known by inference. Both their presence and absence are directly experienced.
Yes. So happiness and misery, I cannot really know them simply looking at the facial expressions of others. I know them myself. It is my mind that sorrows, grieves, agitates. It is my mind that is serene and peaceful. Experience of another is pointless at all. Okay, one more.
तथा सति सुषुप्तौ च दुःखाभावोऽनुभूतिभिः विरोधी दुःखराहित्यात् सुखं निर्विघ्न मिष्यताम्. In the same way, the absence of all miseries is directly experienced in deep sleep, and since they are the opposite to bliss, their total absence is unhindered bliss, which has to be accepted as our experience.
Your voice went a little crackly for me. Repeat it again.
In the same way, the absence of all miseries is directly experienced in deep sleep, and since they are the opposites to bliss, their total absence is unhindered bliss, which has to be accepted as our experience.
Yes. So my direct experience is in deep sleep, when the projecting mind is folded up, there's no triputī. I wake up in the morning. Oh, I slept so soundly. That's our direct experience. And again, at what I call snooze alarm bliss, that early morning state, when the mind, little bit of awareness, but the projecting power has yet to start afflicting us. All right, I think that's pretty clear. We'll end here. What verse are we on for next week?
39.
39. Okay. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.